Hey, this is Steve Gordon, and I want to share with you a little bit of the challenges that I've seen with people trying to follow up to things like proposals and after trade shows and after networking events. And the thing that we hear from our clients pretty often is they go to these events or they've sent out a proposal and they get crickets after that. Or sometimes, particularly with things like trade shows and all that, they get all these leads and then they don't know how to follow up after that and move people on to the next step. And one of the things we've noticed is that there are a few kind of commonalities that tend to get in the way. So in this video, I want to talk about a shift that you need to make in the way that you think about follow up and some things that you need to put in place to make the follow up easier. So there's good news and bad news. The bad news first, that most of the obstacles that you think you have around follow up are in your head. And you've got to make a courageous decision to really be able to ignore those and ignore all the reasons that you've avoided follow up in the past and just go and do the work. When you're able to do that, it will absolutely transform your business and you're going to have a whole lot more fun when you follow up. Now, there is some good news. There's some really good news. For those of you who think that some people just have that follow up gene built in, there's no such thing. Follow up is a skill. And I tell you, it wasn't something that was easy for me early in my career. It's something that I really had to develop that skill and understand how to follow up and how to do it well. So I wasn't creepy, because you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the one that's like calling up and, hey, I'm just checking in. How's that proposal coming? You want to avoid that, and you want to follow up in a way that adds value and that actually makes you feel good at the end of it, that furthers the relationship no matter what happens. And that's really, really important. And so what I want you to understand as we go through the next couple of minutes in this video is that there isn't any special sort of genetic makeup for this. It's a skill that you can develop. And to get there, to be able to do that, you've got to deal with some common fears of follow-up and get to a point where you don't really worry about those anymore. And you've got to understand what the main obstacles are so that you can have a strategy to be ready for those obstacles and to overcome them. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about follow-up reality, because I think a lot of people look at follow-up and they have one sort of impression in their mind of its purpose. And I think reality is a little bit different than that. So that's what we're going to cover on the video. So let's talk about these fears. To me, this is the bumpiest part of this whole flight that we're on together during this video. The number one reason people fail to follow up is fear. And they're afraid that they're going to annoy the prospect, that they're interrupting, that maybe they're not wanted, that maybe they don't have anything of value to offer, or that they'll say the wrong thing and mess up the relationship. And we could go on and on and on and make that list really, long and extensive. And there are all these fears. And you got to let go of the fears. My coach and one of my mentors, the guy that I've learned a ton from over the last 5 years, is named Dan Sullivan. You may have heard of him from Strategic Coach. And he's got a saying that all progress begins by telling the truth. And you've got to be honest with yourself about why you're not following up. Now, all of those fears that you have and the ones that I just listed may have really resonated with you. None of those are true. Of all of those fears, when you really look at them on the face, those are just excuses that we all give for not following up. And really, none of those are warranted. I think you got to give yourself a little more credit than that you do have a lot of value to offer, and that when you approach follow-up in the right way, that you're actually showing up and doing service to that client or that prospect. And so, the easy thing for me to do at this stage would just tell you, hey, get over it. I know that that's not really helpful if you're stuck behind any of those fears. But, at the same time, we've worked with a number of entrepreneurs who've fixed their follow-up. And ultimately, it's because they've just swallowed really hard on those fears. And they've said, okay, I have these fears. I'm going to act in spite of my fear. I'm going to move and act and go out and serve the people that I'm meant to serve. And I've got to do this follow-up thing, even though, it feels a little uncomfortable at first. And every new skill that you develop feels uncomfortable at first. You feel unsure of yourself. You're not confident in it. And that's really the first step to getting to the point where you have this skill. So what I want to encourage you to do is embrace that fear. Take it as a sign that you're doing something important and that you're on the right track, and move beyond it and act anyway. So the techniques we're going to talk about really will be of no use to you unless you can get really honest with yourself and understand what's kept you from following up. Because look, I've given talks on this, for 9 years now. And I'll never forget the very first talk I gave was on referral marketing and following up. And I went and talked to 20 people who were at that very first workshop, and talked to them 6 months later out of the 300 who attended. And not one of those 20 people had put into practice the ideas that they all admitted were amazing, great ideas that were really going to help them. And the reason that they didn't do it was because they feared that when they went and did it, it wouldn't be perceived well, or they didn't have anything of value to offer. All the reasons that we've talked about. And I don't want that to be you. I want you to go ahead and acknowledge why you haven't been following up, whether it's that you feel like you have a lack of time or that there's some other block in the way. Get honest with yourself, because until you get honest with yourself, you can't get past that. I think that's really, really important. I know I'm spending a lot of time on it here, but it really is the first step in getting to the point where you're following up consistently. Because I know that this whole idea of people following up, one of the reasons that I get asked this question all the time is that people aren't doing it. Business owners know they need to do it, and they feel like it's a burden when it really shouldn't be. It leads to such tremendous opportunity when you do it well, you do it with confidence, and when you follow up with elegance and value. And so I want you to get there, but until you really are honest about why you haven't followed in the past, it's going to be difficult to get there, because you're going to have those same problems in the way. Now, when we begin to think about some of the obstacles to follow up, in some cases, these are really practical things. The first and biggest one is the fact that you lack context for the follow-up. And, if you've ever had someone give you one of those just checking in calls, they're trying to sell you something and they call up every quarter because you're on their calendar every quarter to check in with. The reason that that's all that they can say is that they don't know anything about you. They haven't invested in developing a relationship with you. And so they have no context for a conversation beyond, hey, I'm just checking in. And that's a place that I don't want you to be. So the first thing you got to recognize is that without context for follow-up, it's going to be really difficult for you to follow up effectively and feel good about it. So I want you to begin paying attention to your interactions with clients and with prospects so that you get that context and that you document it. A couple of months ago, I wrote an article on our blog we'll link to in the notes below. And I talked about a method that I use to document my relationships with both potential clients and referral partners, people in my network, and even our clients. I call it the 3x3 prospect analyzer. And it's really just a sheet of paper where I make notes about the relationships that they're looking to gain, the goals that they have over the next 3 years, the threats to their current business that they need to eliminate, and a whole host of other things. It's actually a matrix on a sheet of paper with 3 blocks across the top and 3 going down. So there's nine different areas of information that I'm listening for and gathering every time I talk to someone. And then when I need to follow up with them, I've got a wealth of information, and it's super easy. And this isn't a computerized thing or anything like that. In fact, I recommend that you do it on paper. I keep them in a notebook so I can flip through them because it makes it really, really easy to find what you need and do it quickly and efficiently. So that's the first big barrier to effective follow-up, not having context. The second is no value. And this is a really difficult and troubling place to be. If you feel like you are in your follow-up, you're not adding any value to the situation, you're in real trouble. You need to fix that, because if you show up and don't add any value, pretty soon people are going to ignore you. And so you want to be looking for ways you can add value. Now, one way to do that is have really great context, because then you can bring value to the table. You know enough information to bring value to the table. But there are a lot of different ways you can do that. One of my favorite ways to bring value is with ideas. Now, I have yet to meet an entrepreneur or a business owner who didn't have ideas. And I like to describe this, rather than just say ideas, this is really your worldview. This is the answer to the question of how we do things. Here's how we do things. Here's why we do things the way we do them, and why we think and believe it is superior in the marketplace. It's our worldview. It's our belief system for what we do and how we deliver a solution to our clients. And you've got the ability to communicate that, and communicate it on a lot of different levels. You do a lot of things. The service that you deliver is layered and complex, and you can take pieces of that and deliver that as follow-up to stay top of mind with your prospects and the people in your network, to add value to them, to give them an idea that may not solve every one of their problems, but it might be an idea that helps move them forward. And when you deliver that idea, you're gaining relationship equity there. And so ideas are the first place that I start, mostly because they're easy. In fact, there's a great book out by James Altucher where he talks about building your idea muscle, and doing that by writing down 10 ideas a day, and thinking about, when you're building a relationship, thinking about 10 ideas for one person that will help move them forward. Very easy to do, doesn't cost you anything, but 15 or maybe 20 minutes of time. And you'd be amazed what you can come up with and how much value that can add for people. Just the fact that you thought of them is valuable, and that you invested that amount of time to think about their world and their business and their life is going to be valuable to them. And it's going to help you follow up. And then that opens a conversation, and you're able to take the conversation in other directions if that's what you need to do. The second big way that you can deliver value is through relationships. So you've got people in your network, and they've got goals. You may have a prospect who has a goal that they're working on something, and and maybe you're a part of helping them reach that goal, but maybe there are 3 or 4 other sets of expertise that they need, and that you can connect them with, because that expertise is in your network. You've got those resources. Well, now you've become infinitely more valuable to them. And so by understanding where someone is going and what types of relationships would help them get there, you've got really great ammunition for following up and being valuable to them. And so you want to be able to use ideas and relationships as currency in your follow-up. And you can do that on a lot of different levels. And so one of the ways that I use relationships and follow-up is I have relationships with an audience through my podcast, through our email list. I have relationships through people I've interviewed on my podcast. I'm able to take those relationships and look for the places where connecting to people would be very valuable, whether that's a new client, which I actually have just done this week. Took one of our new podcasting clients who's looking for guests in a particular area, and I've actually interviewed several of those people and connected him up with them. And so as a value add, he got access to my network. We do that with prospects all the time. A lot of times as we're talking with someone, because we built this audience, it's really valuable to somebody that we want to do business with or we want to partner with. And so I'm able to use the relationship that I have with that audience to allow that person to come in, deliver value to that audience. And the fact that I'm able to give them that access and connect them with those people gives tremendous value to them. And so it gives me this great context for figuring out how to collaborate and take my business relationship with them a little bit deeper. All right, so let's look at the third big barrier here to effective follow-up, and that's no roadmap. So we've talked about no context, we've talked about no value, and we've talked about how to solve both of those. And the third is no roadmap. And what I mean by that is you don't know where you're going with follow-up. So a lot of people get stuck because maybe you send out a proposal and you haven't thought through what the next step's going to be, or you met someone at a networking event that you think maybe you can do business with, but you haven't thought through, how am I going to follow up with that person? Or maybe you've gone to a trade show and you had a booth and now you got all these leads, but you didn't think through, what are we going to do the day we get back from the trade show or from the conference or from giving that speech? And one of the things that we've seen has been a real breakthrough for people is to create a roadmap ahead of time. And what we found is there's really just a limited number of these that you need. And there are some patterns that work. So, a particular pattern for following up from, let's say, a trade show or a conference or a networking event really becomes pretty universal across businesses. We found these patterns are pretty standard. And once you've got it, now you've got a really easy roadmap, literally, for how to follow up. So you don't have to think about, well, what am I going to do when I get back? Because that's what bogs people down. You don't know what to do. You're a little bit unsure. And so you just sort of sit there stuck. You probably say, well, I don't have time to get to it right now, so I'll get to it tomorrow. You get in procrastination mode because you don't know what that next step is. And now weeks have passed, months have passed, all those leads have gone cold, all that opportunity is lost. And you're sitting here kicking yourself because you didn't follow up. And all that is between you and really great follow-up in that case is really probably having a great roadmap to be able to do it. And so that's the third key thing that you want to think about overcoming. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Followup Reality, and we'll wrap up with this. And the reality for your prospects is that they've got problems and they've got opportunities, and they lack the knowledge and the capability and the resources to go either solve the problem or capture the opportunity on their own. And this is a universal truth. People are out there looking for help, looking for leadership, and they're looking for the leadership that you can provide. And, and they come into your world, you cross paths with them, and you don't have a way to follow up. So now you've got no way to provide the leadership that they need. That's the reality of follow-up. So we started off with this idea of all these fears that we run into related to follow-up and the reasons that we don't do it. And that's kind of internal to us. You may be sitting there thinking, well, that's not me. Well, ask yourself, are you following up as effectively as you could? Because if you're not, chances are there's some fear down in there. You need to explore that and get to the truth. But what I want you to know is that there's a deeper reality, that you're really called to serve. And I don't mean that to be flippant. I don't mean that lightly. You've got a solution, and there are people out there that need it, and they're looking for it. And it serves both them, and frankly, it serves you and your business and your family to be able to serve them. And for you to be able to do that effectively, you need to follow up. You need to be able to follow up with context and with value, and you need to have a roadmap for doing it. And when you have those things in place, you can fulfill that call to serve. You can provide that leadership that they're looking for, and you can help people move forward, which is why you're in business in the first place. And so I want you to fix your follow-up, which is why I recorded this video. Now, if you're in my audience, you probably know, because we've been sharing some snippets of my upcoming book out with you. But we're about to launch my next book called The Follow-Up Formula. And it's going to really walk you through the process we've been kind of teaching one-on-one with our clients over the last few years, that shows them how to create these really simple roadmaps, how to figure out what to say in those messages so that you have some easy to use message templates, and how to think ahead 3 or 4 or 5 moves in the follow-up. See, we approach follow-up a little bit differently. We look at follow-up as a conversation, a back and forth between you and the prospect. That's the way it works most effectively. And so in the book, I'm going to show you how we actually work through and create those conversations and that back and forth. And it'll dramatically change the way that you follow up and the way that you approach those things. It actually makes it a lot of fun. It makes it real simple to execute on. And so if you're watching this and you're curious about that book, you want to find out more, I encourage you to go to unstoppableceo.net/follow-up formula, and you can find information about the book there. Depending on when you watch this, if it's just before the launch, you'll be able to sign up for our early notification list. If you see this video after the launch, you'll be able to buy the book, and I hope it helps you. It's a really small investment to dramatically change your business and change your impact. Good luck.